Among the characters Agent Carlson encounters and converses with, only one character stays in one place for the entirety of the game, and that character is of course the French card sharp Buick Riviera. At a glance, this character has nothing particularly unnatural about him. That is, until you converse with every other character, and Riviera himself. Indeed, after some in-depth investigation, I think you'll find that not only is Riviera more sinister than he first appears, but may also be, in fact, the devil himself. Vlad, whose surname is Demonic, strangely enough, is introduced as a stowaway in the boiler rooms who asks Carlson for help in the form of delivering a package from Sasha Barbican. This facade of a more or less innocent man quickly melts away as it becomes clear Vlad is also a man on a vengeful mission and is willing to kill all who stand in his way. Upon leaving the smokestack with Willy von Haderlitz's notebook, Vlad all the more proves this by attempting to kill Carlson with a massive wrench and stealing the notebook, leaving him for dead with the words,
"You see, my friend, we will all meet the devil, eventually."
This cynical statement naturally refers to Vlad thinking he successfully did away with Carlson once and for all. But it would seem there is more to it than that. The pathway to retrieving the notebook from Vlad involves going to the first-class lounge where Willy's love, Clarice Limehouse, gives Carlson her shawl, a potential disguise which Carlson then offers to Vlad as a trade for the notebook. But this trajectory in order to retain the notebook from Vlad Demonic also leads Carlson back to Leland Trask, who suggests playing cards with Riviera as the ship sinks. Leyland Sachem Trask is a seer or psychic who helps guide Carlson to his next objective by giving readings on various objects and making occasional suggestions, one of which, as aforementioned, is playing with Riviera in order to get the boat pass. Trask is also one of the very few characters that seems to know that Carlson is a man out of time, and urges him to not fail and pay heed to his own choices, as they will alter the future. In Christian belief, psychics get their metaphysical powers from the devil himself, and thus, as one might expect, the Reverend Edgar Troutt disapproves of Trask. From Carlson's very first encounter with him, Troutt warns against and condemns Trask and his outrageous blasphemies, as he puts it. Troutt also more than once denounces gambling as a sin, a thing which even Carlson must partake in order to save Georgia and complete his mission as well. As Troutt warns, that which is not from God is not of God, which logically implies that gambling is of the devil himself. As bad as Vlad is, he is nothing compared to unquestionably the most diabolical character in the game, Colonel Zeitel. Aside from being unashamedly nasty in general, Zeitel is responsible for electrocuting his associate Willy von Haderlitz, attempting to kill Carlson twice, and poisoning Lady Georgia Lambeth. Given that Haderlitz has had his share of gambling, as we learn from Reverend Troutt, it is possible that Zeitel himself had also partaken in playing a few hands with Riviera. Zeitel also happens to be the other character found in the first-class lounge as the ship sinks, the same place Trask first urges Carlson to play cards with Riviera in order to get the boat pass. Interestingly enough, however, this sold-out individual makes no mention of Riviera whatsoever. That is, until you have Riviera's boat pass, a thing Zeitel somehow knows you have and as a result offers the painting in return for it, almost as though Zeitel knew that he would not yet have to face death and answer for his sins, because Riviera would bring him deliverance from the doomed ship in the form of Carlson handing over the boat pass. Beatrix Conkling is a fashion designer and is the wife of Andrew Conkling, the Steel Baron. The most reprehensible character second only to Colonel Zeitel, Beatrix is also an arrogant and uncivil woman who is most likely the initiator of Shayla Hacker's surrogacy, and is responsible for the kidnapping of her infant son. Given women smoking was strongly frowned upon in 1912, women were not allowed in the Titanic smoking room. It is clear, therefore, Beatrix immensely enjoys flaunting not only her rebellion, but also the very wealth that allows her to do so as Mrs. Conkling. Beatrix is also the only character other than Carlson that actively seeks advice from Trask the Seer, evidently having been doing so for a considerable time. Beatrix also personally knows the charming Colonel Zeitel, as she labels him, long enough to the point where Zeitel disclosed his interest in, quote, rare books, unquote, an obvious reference to the Rubaiyat. Few characters frequent the smoking room, Riviera's virtual residence. A curious thing that Beatrix Conkling is one such character. Andrew Conkling is a man of many faults, some of which are cowardice and surrogacy, but his chief vice is fraud. Conkling is the chairman of Conkling Steel, which provides steel for ships, one of which being the Titanic itself. However, upon conversing with Shayla Hacker, Conkling's former parlor maid, it is revealed the Titanic's hull is high in sulfur, an impurity that would bring forth the ultimate reckoning. Strangely enough, Conkling's first location as the ship sinks is the smoking room, leaving it only to make a desperate attempt to escape the retribution for his own folly. But alas, he only seals his fate in doing so, and meets his end before even the Titanic meets its own. It may be, however, that there was one other individual who knew of Conkling's scandal. Lord Charles Lambeth is a man reduced to a drunkard with empty pockets, resulting from being heavily indebted to Andrew Conkling as well as the increasing volatility and infidelity of his wife, Lady Georgia. As one might imagine, Charles is also a man who is willing to keep quiet about the dirty little secrets of others, if it means the ability to use them as blackmail, something he admits to by relating his plan to put away Georgia, and making it possible by coercing Sasha into helping him do so, given his knowledge of Sasha's affiliation with the Black Hand. As a photograph of Charles and Conkling discussing business reveals, Charles' association with Conkling is no secret, and it thus seems likely, if not probable, that Charles knew of Conkling's error of putting high sulfur into the Titanic's steel, and thus sharing the guilt. But instead of attempting to bribe the officers for a seat in the lifeboat, Charles rather chooses to go to the devil, full of gin, fulfilling the words of Officer Morrow.
Drink always leads to the devil.
But it would seem, like Vlad's words, there is more to it than that, considering that the two men, in effect, responsible for the death of over 1,000 souls by making a deadly gamble, are both, as the ship sinks, first found in the smoking room, the room where only one character never leaves, the chief gambler aboard the ship, Buick Riviera himself. Agent Carlson, the player's character, is a member of the British Bureau of Secret Service. Or was. At the very beginning of the game, the player is shown Carlson's future, an old and alone failure of a man. From postcards and the memory triggered from his own pocket watch, it becomes apparent that Carlson had a mission aboard the Titanic, a mission he had failed, and as a result was dismissed from the service. Hence, as it would seem, in hopes of correcting that mistake in his mind, Carlson spent the rest of his life fixing watches, attempting to fix time, to change the past, correct his mistake, and complete his mission. Later on, while aboard the ship itself, what that mission was is spelled out as the very prevention of the world collapsing into the catastrophes of the two world wars, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the rise of communism. 30 years later, the prologue itself reveals Carlson's failure to complete the mission, as it is in the heart of World War II itself. Nevertheless, Carlson carries on, attempting to fix the past by fixing watches, but he cannot change the past, a truth he knows and is heavily reminded of by his own watch and by the boat pass, a clear indicator that he fled the doomed ship by gambling with Riviera, and so he tries to further drown out that reality with drink and heavy smoking. But his failure and the boat pass, La Morte, his deal with the devil, come to the ultimate reckoning when a German bombing raid kills Carlson himself. And yet, even this isn't the end for Carlson, as it appears that he is granted a purgatorial reliving of his mission aboard the Titanic, with a chance to complete his mission and set history in an entirely different direction for the better, as well as new life for himself, something Leland Trask is evidently aware of. And yet, even there, aboard the Titanic of the past, Riviera is in the smoking room, playing blackjack. Finally, we examine the man Buick Riviera himself. Naturally, Riviera already stands out from the rest of the characters as he is the only Frenchman aboard the ship. Considering the long history of rivalry between the British and the French, it is no surprise Carlson is already given a distrustful impression of Riviera by his own steward Smethels, who, when asked if Riviera is a good player, Smethels returns with,
"Oh, I would never play games with the French. They cheat."
Although Riviera may not appear too sinister at face value as aforementioned, his demeanor is still rather curious and distinct. Very few people Carlson encounters wear any form of red, red being, of course, a color with various sinister connotations, and Riviera is one of the few who dons this color. Riviera also has a habit of laughing frequently, mostly after Carlson loses a game of blackjack. Further, while Riviera has silver hair, his face is very youthful, as though Carlson were not the only man out of time. It is also curious that Riviera is always in the smoking room, and as Carlson points out to Beatrix, where there's smoke, there's fire. Riviera is also strangely unalarmed as the Titanic sinks, and chooses to remain in the smoking room. Riviera is also a man of uncanny knowledge. It is one thing to know that the diamond necklace Carlson lays down in the bet for the boat pass belongs to Lady Georgia. It is another thing to know that Carlson has seen the boat pass before. Upon revealing the boat pass, Riviera chuckles, knowing that the boat pass is already familiar to Carlson, once again suggesting Riviera is also a man out of time. Besides Trout's condemnation of gambling, Carlson is given other reasons for being distrustful of Riviera. Max Zeitel, apparently the most frequent player 2 for Riviera, warns against Riviera's trickery from the very beginning. Worse than that, however, is the fact that there are even further instances where Riviera seems to be compared to the devil himself. Officer Morrow relates to Carlson that the crew is afraid of Riviera because they say he can predict the future. Morrow further points out that most card sharps use an alias, but Riviera does not, since he has the devil's luck. Riviera also tells Carlson that the game for the boat pass is a game for souls. Regardless if you win or lose the game for the pass, Riviera's final words to Carlson are,
"Well, maybe I see you again. Before you die."
A declaration that is rather fulfilled in spirit by Carlson's true death and the presence of liquor, cigarettes, and the boat pass, La Morte, with him. Last of all, if Carlson tries escaping the ship by handing the boat pass to Officer Morrow, a man who has made implied warnings against the devil himself, Morrow will not be moved and will reject the pass. However, upon revealing the pass to either of the sailors under Morrow as the ship sinks, both of whom likely fear Riviera and the devil, not only will both let Carlson aboard a lifeboat with fear in their eyes, but also one of them will state,
"The pass! The devil himself wouldn't be so bold."
This raises one final observation. Why does Riviera not use the boat pass for himself? There can be only two reasons for this. Either Riviera is a man who cares nothing for his own life, or quite simply, he is not a man at all.